I don't know why I thought this one would be quick when there's over, 20 plus promoted classes in this game. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel.
Unicorn Overlord.
Hello everyone. If you enjoy what I do, including exhaustive, fully script out class overviews for hyper-specific turn-based strategy RPGs, a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And like I said in the intro, I don't know why I thought this one would be as quick as I thought that it would, seeing as how there are a lot of promoted classes and there's a good bit to talk about with each of them. So we're just going to get into it. As always, you can find all of the basic information about any given class in the ribbon below, like its weapon types, mobility, stamina, all that type of stuff. Not generally many changes here, but they'll be there when you need to see them. And the companion tier list video will also be out around the same time as this video. There's a possibility that it'll actually come out first, depending on scheduling things. We'll see. You'll know better than I, honestly, because it might be out by the time you see this video. Who knows? With that said, if you have any other questions about how these overviews work or anything like that, refer back to the previous two episodes. We're getting into it. Starting with High Lord. High Lord, unsurprisingly, is Elaine's promotion and has to be one of the single most dramatic changes out of all of the promoted classes. He gets an extra accessory slot on promotion, and he also gains a greater focus on physical damage dealing compared to the more tank-focused Lord, while still being capable of tanking, which is really nice. He gets the addition of a mount, making him a cavalry unit, a trait which massively increases Elaine's anti-infantry capabilities, as well as increasing his move range when he is the leader of his squad. His new skills include Rapid Order at level 25 and Spinning Edge at level 30. Rapid Order boosts all allies' initiative at the start of battle by 20, an okay skill if you're building an all-out blitz team or just have no other start of battle options, but it is not typically my favorite compared to some other nasty capabilities that we will talk about later on in this video. Spinning Edge, meanwhile, is definitely Elaine's best attack and potentially one of the best attacks in the game. It attacks a row of enemies, ignores 50% of their defense, and grants Elaine +1 passive point if he kills something, allowing him to do more tanking, more blocking for allies, or potentially using other support skills that you have accessories equipped on him for. This attack alone, honestly, just is what makes Elaine into an offensive powerhouse. Lean Edge is great, Cavalry Slayer is great, but Spinning Edge just devastates enemies, especially if they're infantry. Now granted, you do lose a lot of stamina in the change from infantry to cavalry, but that isn't really a huge deal. I say a lot, it's 1 point, but I mean 1 point can be the difference, especially on higher difficulty levels like True Zenoiran. So it is something to consider, but at least in my playtime in Expert, has not been too big of a deal. We'll see if I have to revisit that opinion once I get to High Lord on True Zenoiran. Seriously though, like, you don't want to sleep on Elaine's promotion. Get High Lord as soon as possible. It should probably be your first promotion for the extra move speed on the map and just for the massive increase in power that Elaine gets. He's not just a tank anymore. He can tank just as effectively as he did before, but also just slay out, which is great. Speaking of tanks, we have to talk about Vanguard next. This is Fighter's promotion, and it is a much-needed boost to help the class fulfill its role. There's been a lot of pushback. People have had a lot of opinions about Fighter, about Vanguard, but I truly do feel that Vanguard is actually a very, very solid class. It's not going to be S tier or anything like that, but people very much underserve this class, and that's surprising to me because it does have a lot on offer in terms of tanking. You get an extra accessory slot on promo. Beyond the increased base stats that you get, you also get 2 new skills. Defender at level 20 and Provoke, which is different from the Valor skill Provoke that Fighters and Vanguards also have at level 25. Defender is a very nice single-target attack, hitting twice for 75 physical potency, granting the user plus 50% defense, which is awesome, and +1 passive point if the attack lands, similar to Spinning Edge killing something, but at this point you don't even need to kill anything, you can just land the hit. And again, that's going to allow you to cover for your allies or guard yourself even more effectively. It does cost 2 AP, but I think it's worth it because this attack is a big step up from Warding Slash. Provoke, on the other hand, is a situationally useful start of battle skill, forcing a row of enemies to target the Vanguard while buffing his guard rate by 50%. Now, this is very, very nice when fighting a row of backline archers or other sorts of physical-based backline enemies, because it'll protect your backline with one action if they're ranged units, or make sure that all of those physical attacks are landing on your Vanguard if it's something like, say, a bunch of hoplites or things like that. Of course, if it's mages, You're not going to want to do that unless you have some really heavy dedicated anti-magic shields that you can put on your Vanguard, in which case it'll actually be useful, but really this allows you to use something like a utility shield because you get that 50% guard rate buff, so you can have something that maybe isn't necessarily maxed out on guard rate while still being extremely tanky in the process. With this skill, a lone Vanguard on the front line can take full aggro, fulfilling their tank role completely by aggroing the enemy back line, and of course having the enemy front line more often than not only being able to target your front line. If your Vanguard is the only thing up there, or maybe is like co-tanking with something, boom, you're solid. This really does allow them to fully fulfill their tank role in a way that's different, but I would say equal to Legionnaires, and I really do enjoy the playstyle of Vanguard. Just make sure, again, that you have some magic shields and or healing on hand to help keep them up, but, I mean, again, it would be the same thing with like a Legionnaire or a Werebear or something, so. Their Valor skill becomes Provoke 2, targeting enemies in a wide area and forcing them towards the user. This is, of course, massively useful for pulling groups out of cover and into bad positions, since you can hit in an area and pull potentially a very heavily massed group of enemies. Again, I love Vanguards. I think they're phenomenal. I really think that people are underselling how powerful they can be. Legionnaires are not your only physical tank out there. Neither are Werebears. You gotta give Vanguards a second chance. They have okay damage output, especially if you give them a sword that has a special unique attack on it. And with things like Provoke and their ability to block arrows, they can really be a major thorn in the side of any enemy. You gotta watch magic, yeah, you gotta watch hammers, yeah, but again, you can say the same thing of any of your other physical tanks. It's not that big of a deal. Moving on to Sergeant. This is the promoted class of the Soldier, and is a class that focuses even more on buffs, while still being very versatile. They also get an extra accessory slot on promotion. They get new skills Honed Spear and Active Gift, which come in at level 20 and 25 respectively. Honed Spear is a column attack like Long Thrust with 130 physical potency, costs 2 active points, gets plus 50 potency if the user is buffed, which is pretty nice, and Cavalry can't guard against it. This is very powerful in a buff-centric squad, such as an All-Sergeants squad, thanks to Keen Call making that buff damage a guaranteed crit, which can be really nasty, but there are a number of ways to go about activating this secondary effect. Meanwhile, Active Gift is a very interesting support skill. It costs you 2 passive points to use, but it gives an ally plus 1 active point after they use an active skill. This is a nice way to get around limited AP boosting items or enable specific combos. It's not as directly useful as things like extra crits from Keen Call and general use, but when it is going to be useful for you, it's going to be very useful. Just the fact that you can guarantee that maybe a Sellsword or a Landsknecht that only has 3 AP might actually be able to get 2 Bastard's Cross in there, which we'll talk about later on in the video. Using this skill, if you don't have a way to get them up to 4 AP, that's really powerful. That's a lot of extra potential damage output, and that's before you even start considering things that are going to be more combo-tastic. This is definitely a fun one, but it will be more situational than something like Keen Call. Their Valor skill upgrades to Life Aid 2, which heals and reses fallen allies in an area. This is very nice. It's still only a 1 HP heal, but being able to group all of your guys together, pop 1 Life Aid 2 for 1 Valor point, and get everyone who is downed back on their feet can be a huge difference maker, especially if you combine that with something like Heal 2 from promoted clerics to then heal everyone in that area as well. I love Sergeants. They have so much fun combo potential. They're very good as a stacked, like, mono class unit. They just have a lot going for them, and they're pretty happy to slot into any given unit. Next up, we have Vikings. This, oddly, I've had some pushback on when talking about Vikings before. I think Vikings are phenomenal. They might not be as overwhelmingly powerful as their base form Housecarl is at the contextual points in the game that you're going to be using them, but they are still very strong. Again, these are the promotion of Housecarl that leans even further into physical defense shredding with added ally buffs as well. They get a shield slot on promotion, helping with their overall poor survivability and potentially giving them some more utility options. And then get the new skills Widebreaker and Warhorn, which come in at level 20 and 25 respectively. Widebreaker is a row attack, deals 100 physical potency, costs 2 AP, reduces enemy defense by 30%, and gets a damage buff if enemies are already debuffed, allowing it to pull double duty as an opener or a finisher depending on your squad makeup and when your Viking goes. This is a really nice mixed ability that, again, can make a mono class unit like a all Vikings squad very powerful, or just a Viking potentially able to deal a lot of extra damage or debuff for allies. It's very awesome. However, the real cream of the crop here is Warhorn. This is your start of battle skill. It costs 2 passive points, and it makes all ally attack skills unguardable. In a physical attacking squad where your Viking should be anyway, this can be a devastating buff for your team, allowing you to carve through guard-reliant enemies like cavalry, fighters, and hoplites with ease that you would really not expect until you see it in action. You combine that with an accuracy boosting skill, and this will allow you to handle both dodge tanks and guard tanks with really only one class, which is really quite nasty. The Valor skill becomes Vitalized 2, restoring 2 stamina to all allies in an area, which is insanely valuable as a utility piece. Like, cumulatively, that's potentially plus 20 stamina for your entire army, spread out across all of your units, but still, like, that's a lot of extra battles that you can get in just for using a couple Valor points on this. Vikings are awesome. I really think that the people who undersell them severely, although it seems like the majority of people understand that they are actually quite powerful, which makes me happy because I think they're super cool. Now, less super cool, and I've gotten some flack for this one, but I'm going to stick by it, Swordmasters. These are the promotion of Sword Fighter, doubling down on high risk, high reward damage. They get an extra sword slot on promo, but it's important to note that you don't actually get increased damage from the second sword slot. You only get bonus effects like new skills, extra crit rate, active points, etc., which is still really strong, don't get me wrong, but I really thought that when we got that second sword on promotion, that it was going to be the damage boost that my Swordmasters needed to punch through tankier targets. Not the case, which is balanced, but unfortunate, I would say. They get new skills Meteor Slash and Charged Impetus, coming in at 20 and 25. Meteor Slash is a single target damage nuke, 20 potency per hit, but with a whopping 9 hits and a plus 30% crit rate for 2 AP. This is a skill that wants support desperately to help its low damage. But any buffs to damage for your Swordmaster, any buffs to their crit rate, or any nerfs to enemy defense, such as something like, say, Viking, that can make attacks unguardable, or other skills that can reduce defense, again, like Viking, will make Meteor Slash very deadly very quickly. It needs a lot of support to start doing the damage that you want it to deal. Charged Impetus is a very interesting one. It is a self-buff after using an active skill, which grants the user plus 1 AP and plus 50% crit damage, which is very interesting. Combine this with something like Meteor Slash, and you're going to be in a pretty nice position, though it does cost 2 passive points. You can open with Keen Edge or Impale, then use Charged Impetus, and then swing with a big Meteor Slash if you really want to maximize your damage and your crit damage. Squishy targets will get just annihilated, just blended by this combo. But again, harder targets are going to need to be debuffed, or again, your Swordmaster is going to need a damage buff to get the most out of this combo of abilities, which is why I start to feel a little down on them. They require a lot of investment in a moment-to-moment basis to really hit their damage potential. Swordmaster really does lean into the strong butt category that Swordfighter falls into as well. They need a lot of support to be good, but once they have it, they tear. Their Valor skill becomes Quick Impetus 2, increasing the size of the sigil that they get as a sword fighter, which boosts the initiative of all allies within it. Next, for sword-wielding units, we have my personal favorite class in the game, the Landsknecht. And again, I know, not quite pronouncing it properly, but I've been informed that there's really no way to pronounce it properly if you are proficient in English and not in German, so I'm doing my best over here, I promise. This is, of course, the promotion of Sellsword, and is another huge growth point akin to High Lord for their class. Landsknechts gain a shield on promotion, helping massively with survivability alongside their now absolutely massive HP pool. Landsknechts actually get 3 new skills after promoting, our first instance of such a thing with our promoted classes, as well as hugely boosted stats. Those skills are Bastard's Cross, which we previously mentioned at level 20, Vengeful Guard at level 25, and Bull Force at 30. Bastard's Cross. This is a devastatingly powerful single target attack. It is 70 physical potency per hit with 2 hits. However, the potency of the attack increases based on the target's HP up to plus 60 per hit. This means that as you progress through the game, this attack will scale with enemies' HP across the board, making it always very, very strong. This is going to be one of the most reliable single target attacks in the game for you for the entire game, I promise you. Then we get Vengeful Guard, activates before being hit by a physical attack, costs 1 passive point, and blocks an attack with a medium guard. It also grants the user plus 20% attack, which can stack. Obviously, this synergizes very well with the Landsknecht's whole kit, especially Bastard's Cross if you're able to tank a couple of big hits, and then come in swinging with an even more disgustingly powerful attack. Finally, we get Bull Force. This activates after using an active skill. It grants plus 1 AP, plus 20% physical attack, plus 20 initiative, costs 2 passive points, and is similar to the Swordmaster's Charged Impetus. It allows the Landsknecht to deal more and more damage over the course of the battle, and again, if you consider stacking with things like Vengeful Guard, then popping a big Bastard's Cross, or even just using the damage boost to have even stronger following slashes, things like that, you can see why this gets really gross really, really quickly. Really though, like all of these skills combined with the following slash spam from the Sellsword days means that Landsknechts are going to deal absolutely devastating, crushing amounts of damage. I haven't crunched all the numbers super specifically, but I really would not be surprised to find that Landsknechts reside in the upper echelon of just raw damage output. If they're not at the very top, they're very close to it. Combine that with the utility of getting a shield and the effects that you can put on from that, and it does make the class far more durable, but they do still want some support to protect them from afflictions and the like, which will just completely shut them down. They're also still not great against magic either, so like, they're not busted, but they're really, really strong. Finally, their Valor skill updates to include summon archers, a very nice utility piece that gives a free blocker and assist attacker that will actually patrol around the units that summon them, so you'll always have that assist attacker on hand, and with a little bit of clever positioning, you can kind of throw these extra green units into the enemy if you need to buy a little time, or just deal some damage, what have you. Next, we're moving from damage dealers to tanks with the Legionnaire. This is the promotion of Hoplite, and is primarily focused, even more, on adapting the class to larger squad-based combat and tanking, unsurprisingly. They do gain an accessory slot on promotion, and they also, like the Landsknecht, get 3 new skills on promo: Row Cover, Row Protection, and Great Shield at 20, 25, and 30, respectively. Row Cover activates before an ally is attacked, costs 2 passive points, covers a row of allies with a medium guard, and is generally useful for protecting against the AoE attacks that become very common in the mid to late game. This is really just a necessary upgrade from the basic cover attack that Hoplites already come in with, just to accommodate for the fact that, yeah, there's going to be a lot more AoE attacks from here. Then we have Row Protection, coming in at 1 AP, grants allies in the user's row plus 50% physical defense. This is a very nice way to harden the Legionnaire and other frontline allies against pretty much whatever physical attacks come their way, regardless of target. If you have a bunch of frontline tanks, then this is going to make them very hard to bring down, and it can make other allies that aren't as tanky, like your Landsknechts, your Vikings, different things like that, able to survive a lot more punishment than you would initially give them credit for. Finally, we have Great Shield, coming in at 1 AP. This grants the user plus 50% physical defense and 2 passive points. Really, if you want your Legionnaires to do nothing but cover everyone and everything in your squad, this is the way to do it. Of course, you do want it to activate early before you start taking hits, so an initiative boosting tactic or item is definitely something you would want to consider here if you're going to be using Great Shield, but it is worth it because it makes the Legionnaire and their team nearly impervious to physical attacks. Their Valor skill changes to Fortress 2, negating stage damage suffered by all allies in an area for 20 seconds. This is great for covering everyone from Catapult and Ballista Fire, although it is pretty limited, and you're only going to use this a few times over the course of the game, I would imagine. And even then, you can use Giant's Canopies, the consumable, so might want to save your Valor points for other stuff unless you're really in a sticky situation. But if you are, it will come in really handy. Really, at the end of the game, Legionnaires do much the same as their Hoplite brothers. They tank physical attacks, and they tank them well. They have the same weaknesses at the start of the game, hammers, magic, etc. But you do have many more ways to protect them from these weaknesses by the time you're using Legionnaires, which does definitely help them significantly, and I do think makes them better than Hoplites because of that added support. Next, my boys. Bruno's boys, the big men themselves, Berserkers, here we go. One of my absolute favorite classes in the game, and one of the classes that seems like so many people want to fight me over because they talk about just how bad it is. But like, man, I don't know. I think Berserkers need way less investment to be good than Swordmasters at the very least, and they do have similar crazy damage output in a lot of ways, but Berserkers get AoE, and they can also HP tank, so like I kind of like them a lot more. Maybe it's personal preference, I don't know, but I think they're pretty good. So what are they? Berserkers are the promotion for Gladiators, of course, and similar to Legionnaires, focused on adapting the class to deal with larger squads for the most part. They gain an accessory slot on promotion, and they also get 3 new skills on promotion: Mounting Charge, Berserk, Notch, and Grand Smash, the big one, at 20, 25, and 30 respectively. First off, Mounting Charge gives 1 AP, restores 30% of HP to the user, and grants the user plus 30% attack. Situationally useful, as together with Bulk Up can keep the Berserker alive through the initial round of attacks from fast enemies while boosting their own damage. However, as an active skill, it does delay any of your actual attacks by a full round of combat, so you do need to be able to build around that. If you're worried that your Berserker is going to not survive that first round of combat, that buff isn't going to really help you out. But if they are, now you've got some good damage on your hands. Speaking of surviving combat, we have Berserk. This is 1 passive point, activates before attacking with an active skill, consumes all of your passive points to grant you plus 1 AP, and gives you the ability to survive 1 lethal blow. This one is interesting, as it does, as mentioned, allow you to go for 1 last big swing through something that otherwise would have killed your Berserker. I like to use this on my last point of passive points when Bulk Up wouldn't be enough to tank through the remaining damage on the enemy team, kind of as a Hail Mary. Like, if you get down to this point, you're probably in a desperation situation. You generally don't want to get to this point, but if you do, having Berserk in your back pocket as a way to survive and then come out swinging with what will hopefully finish off the enemy squad, that's not nothing. It's a desperation play, but I mean, what do you think Berserkers rely on, right? Finally, we have Grand Smash. What are you going to want to cast after you're down to your last hit point and you've used Berserk? Obviously, it's Grand Smash. This is an attack with 100 physical potency. It only deals 1 hit with an 80% hit rate. However, it is ranged, and it is ground-based, so it's not going to hit flyers. However, it attacks all enemies. It gets plus 50 potency if the user is at 100% HP, and it costs 2 active points. This is the piece de resistance for the Berserker. This one is fun. Even if you don't get that plus 50 potency from being at full HP, Berserkers have such naturally massive attack before you consider any other buffs that they get from items, allies, or their own skills with things like Mounting Charge, that this attack will crush. It is a hugely damaging attack, and any sort of buff on the Berserker, guaranteed hits, crits, damage buffs like I previously mentioned, etc., will make it even more disgusting. Especially guaranteed hits and crits. Like, that is so gross. If you have this set to activate after you get an attack buff for Mounting Charge, you can easily clear an entire enemy squad, and it is pretty easy to get your accuracy buffed even just through accessories with things like glasses. So like, you might not even necessarily need that guaranteed hit unless you're fighting enemies that have like direct evade skills. And yeah, I hear you. Not being able to hit flyers is a shame, but everything's got to have a weakness, right? Let's be honest. Unless you're granting true hit to your Berserker, you probably weren't hitting flyers anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Their Valor skill becomes Toughness 2, negating stamina loss and knocking back enemies for 2 battles. This can be quite nice. Just being able to say, no, I actually have more stamina than you thought I did, and also I'm going to shove you around the map with my sheer body weight, that can be useful. That can absolutely be very, very useful. Overall, I think Berserkers are great. They can stand on the front line, they can stand on the back line, they can be mixed tanks and damage dealers, they can be raw damage dealers. I love them, man. I think Berserkers are a ton of fun, and I think people are depriving themselves of a very cool tool by not using them. Speaking of big lads, or, well, tiny lasses with big weapons, we have Breakers. This is the promotion from Warrior, and is a very needed one at that. They make for one of the best physical damage dealers in the game, and it is definitely due to the giant meat tenderizer. They gain a second accessory slot on promotion, as well as 3 new skills: Enrage, Heavy Counter, and Row Smash, coming in at 20, 25, and 30. Enrage is really gross. It costs 1 passive point, activates after an ally is hit by an attack, any ally, it does not matter, and it grants the user plus 20% attack and 20 accuracy, and that does stack. As you can probably imagine, this one is pretty wild, since it does trigger whenever any ally is hit by any attacks. In any sort of engagement where your breaker is slower than the enemy, you will have a boost of anywhere from 20 to 80% attack and accuracy before they ever start attacking. That gets so nasty so fast, and it opens up a lot of potential for not needing any other major buffs on your breaker. Maybe you want something that's going to give them True Strike. That's it. That is all they're going to need. Then, of course, we have Heavy Counter. This activates after an enemy attacks with an active skill, is 150 physical potency, unguardable, and 1 passive point. You counterattack a single enemy, you ignore 100% of the defense of armored enemies, and if you want to go for more of a counter build, this is going to be your choice, obviously. It does conflict a bit with Enrage, seeing as how they compete for the same passive point resource, but it is certainly a good option if you want to lean into it. I haven't done this myself yet, but I can imagine there being a really fun heavy counter build going on that kind of works similarly to my Super Tax Bros squad that I have, where you have like one tanky enemy up front and a bunch of sellswords in the back that are doing following slashes. Imagine that, but with heavy counters. Like, yeah, you're not going to get the passive points back, but it's more damage, it's unguardable, and it's going to pierce armored enemies. Like, there's something there, man. There is absolutely something there. Finally, we get Row Smash. This has a physical potency of 100, hit count of 1, and attacks a row of enemies, again ignoring 100% of the defense of armored targets for 2 AP. This is the big one, where you crush half the enemy squad, if not more, after you enrage 1 to 4 times with one big attack. Like, it's simple, it is extremely effective, and there's really not much else to say about it. It's just really strong. Like, getting that big 1 to 4 count in rage and then just crushing an entire row of enemies like it's nothing was pure dopamine injected directly into my cerebellum as soon as I first saw it. It is so much fun. Highly recommend trying this out with a breaker if you have not already. Finally, their Valor skill is upgraded to Heavy Swing 2, dealing damage and destroying barricades in a larger area than the base Heavy Swing 1. And all told, like, man, I was really down on Warriors as like the base promotion of just Warrior. They have their uses, don't get me wrong, but like, I was not super high on them. They just didn't have a lot that they were doing. Then you promote to Breaker, and suddenly the kid gloves come off, and they become, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but definitely one of the best, if not the best, damage dealers, or potentially one of the best damage dealers in the game, at the very least among the generic classes. Next up, we have Sniper, the promotion of Hunter, which is focused on making a stronger AoE fighter. The class gets a second accessory slot on promotion and 2 new skills on promotion, Row Shot and Aerial Snipe, at 20 and 25 respectively. Row Shot has 100 physical potency, is ranged, attacks a row of enemies, and all of this for 2 AP. It's exactly like it says on the tin, isn't it? AoE damage at range, using Eagle Eye, pop rows of flyers and angels, deal good damage to backline mages, burn down rogues and swordmasters. It's all pretty good stuff, really. Aerial Snipe is a little bit different, though. Physical potency of 50, activates after an ally is hit by an attack, counterattack a single enemy with plus 100 potency against flying enemies for 1 passive point. This is similarly simple. A nice little counterattack that deals bonus damage to flying units, and it rounds out the sniper's skill set as a good damage dealer and flyer killer. Simple, but effective. Their Valor skill changes to Arrow Rain 2, dealing damage in a wider area than the base skill. And all of this comes together to make a very solid ranged physical damage dealing class. Doesn't do anything fancy, really no crazy combo potential or anything like that with the base kit. It's just, you want to be able to snipe stuff? Well, you're going to be able to do it. Want to be able to guarantee that you're going to hit stuff? Absolutely. Deal damage to groups of enemies? You got it. It can do all of that and not a whole lot more. But sometimes there is beauty in the simplicity. And that, my friends, is part 1 of the Promoted Units class overview. I was planning to make this a full video with all 22 or whatever it is classes in one, but that is a lot. This video is already quite long, and I'd rather it not be an hour plus to be able to discuss all of these classes. So we're going to break it up, and then the next episode will come in the next day or two. Don't worry, we will get there. We move on to angels, bestrels, all that type of good stuff. So thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for being understanding. This particular section of the project was way more involved than I expected it to be, and I appreciate all y'all sticking around and enjoying it nonetheless. Until part 2, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.